So, hey, everybody, and welcome to the RetroPGF podcast. This is where we talk about everything RetroPGF and share the stories of those who have already been successful at earning RetroPGF funding through their contributions to the Optimism ecosystem. Today, I am very excited to be talking to both CheekyGorilla and Trent from Protocol Guild. Protocol Guild is such an interesting guest for this podcast because, like Optimism's RetroPGF, they are also experimenting with a mechanism to provide financial incentives to fund something that the free market may not value enough on its own. In this case, for Protocol Guild, that would be core Ethereum protocol development. Cheeky and Trent, I'm super excited to have you here. Welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, super pumped to be here. And thanks to you for hosting us, and I guess in general for being a good evangelist of the space.
Yeah, same. Happy to be here. Thank you for having us, letting us share the project.
Awesome. So this is actually the first podcast that I've had two guests. And so I'd say if you guys want to just kind of pick and choose who answers the questions, I'll let you two figure it out. We can just have a roundtable discussion as well. But to start out, maybe you could describe real quick just what your roles at Protocol Guild are.
Sure. So so there aren't really roles like you would imagine, like at a foundation. There's an executive director. There's somebody who does finance work. There are people who handle grants distribution. Protocol Guild is a little different in that even though it's managing a significant amount of money, it's not actually managing it, right? It's just a router. It's a smart contract that points to a registry. And the registry has a list of core devs who are doing important work. And the money just flows directly to them, whether it's tokens from different projects, ETH, stablecoins, all of it just gets split automatically to these core devs who are doing the work. And that's a significant diversion from the way core protocol stuff is typically funded, where it's, people are doing checkups, they're trying to review the work that's been done, and there's a place for this type of funding as well. But Protocol Guild is an autonomous mechanism, and that means we don't have to have as many roles as you might think for the number of members we have and the amount of money that's flowing through it. So long response to say there's no role, but Cheeky and I would probably be close to the core of the people who are helping to bootstrap the mechanism and the norms. So that includes things like what we're doing now. We're on podcasts telling people about what the mechanism does, why this type of funding mechanism, autonomous, going to individuals versus something like a commercial entity, for example, why this type of mechanism is important to fund. And we do, when we're fundraising, we'll go out and talk to people, again, making the case. And then, like I also mentioned, we're iterating on the mechanism. We're trying to take the learnings from the pilot, implement it into the structure and the processes. And then we're working on a couple other things. So trying to get a set of contracts ready for the V2. There's a whole range of stuff that we work on. So I guess broadly we'd be generalists, but everybody in Protocol Guild does things like curating the membership, which is core to how the mechanism itself operates.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into the mechanism later because I think that's one of the most interesting discussions we can have, coming from kind of comparing how RetroPGF for Optimism is working versus what you guys are doing. I think it's really interesting, some of the trade-offs between the two systems. So, one question, I was just curious, maybe each of you could do a quick little intro. Is I ask every guest on the podcast, when did you first get into crypto? And do you remember your first, the first way in which you fell down the rabbit hole?
Go ahead, Cheeky.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess CheekyGorilla, as you know me, he's pretty new. He only exists since I think like October of last year. In fact, this character was more or less created for the Protocol Guild. But I've been in this space a long time before that. I mean, I had a friend back in university. I think this was 2014. He was so into Bitcoin. He was the kind of guy that had his laptop open on the price of Bitcoin at the time. I think it was like trading at like $500. And me not being the giga brain, that did not excite me at all. Like this concept of like digital gold, it did not excite me at all. It really took Ethereum to really hook me. I fancy myself a little bit of a tech entrepreneur before I was CheekyGorilla. And so like the idea of Uber on the blockchain, that was like, wow, that's amazing. I want to be part of that. But I am also really into privacy. And so I guess, yeah, things like signing with Ethereum, things like data sovereignty, they really appealed to me. And so for those reasons, I guess it was really Ethereum's core protocol development that stuck to me more than like DeFi. And so in that same vein, I was a Genesis home staker, and I really wanted to find a way to like get involved in this space. But as I'm not technical, I didn't really have a good way. I'm more of an operations guy, more of a generalist, as Trent said. And fortunately, something like the Protocol Guild gave me basically a footing in the space. And that entailed just kind of walking up to Trent and Tim Bako at DevCon Pagoda and tapping them on the shoulders and saying, "Hey, do you guys need help with what you're doing?" And the answer was yes, and here we are.
Yeah, for myself, so my going back to school, my background is in architecture and design, so something completely unrelated, and I did that professionally for a few years, and I don't even know where I came across it. It might have been Reddit, but yeah, just stumbled upon Ethereum, the Reddit, and just started reading a ton about it. Some of the early experiences that kind of, like you said, pushed me down the rabbit hole were, I think I saw from one of the early dev cons, there was a demonstration of the Mist browser, which isn't, it's not being maintained anymore. It's not really a project, but it was an early example of some people's visions. Alex Van de Sand was one of the people working on it at the time, and he had this demo of sort of, if anybody uses the Gnosis Safe, it's very similar to that. It's like an app store that's connected directly to a wallet, and it was this vision back in the day for Mist. It was this vision of unintermediated access, sort of self-sovereign infrastructure for communities or individuals, and that kind of blew my mind at the time. So yeah, that was probably the early experience that really pushed me to start exploring deeper and deeper. Yeah, and then I eventually quit architecture and started. I did a couple of different jobs at companies in crypto, and then now I work at the Ethereum Foundation.
Awesome. I think that's a great story, Cheeky, about how you just kind of tapped them on the shoulder and volunteered your services to actually contribute. I think that's a very common story throughout this ecosystem. And that's kind of was my story too, is at DevConnect in Amsterdam. That was my first ever actual conference. I didn't know anybody going there, but I met a bunch of the Optimism team there, and I thought, these guys are pretty cool. Let me dive more into this. And I just kind of started working and contributing. And so now I'm pretty much full-time contributing around the ecosystem. So,
and I will add, like, that's also my path as well, and many other people's. Is for anybody who's listening to this now or sometime in the future, the easiest way to get someone's attention is to say, "Hey, how can I help? What sort of projects are you working on that might need assistance doing something?" Yeah, so I started, I think I was like writing transcripts for a podcast that I found interesting, and then I started showing up to like all core devs calls, things like that. Now, granted, this requires that you have some free time, and I'm aware that, yeah, not everybody has the luxury of just being able to do things randomly, but if you do have that available to you, yeah, just offering to help some projects that you find interesting or compelling is the best way to get involved. And if you're looking for it, possibly might lead to a full-time paid position.
Yeah, I think I'm quoting Danny Ryan when I say that doors at Ethereum are wide open. And I may not sound like it, but I am incredibly shy. I made it sound a lot easier than it actually was to go and tap on Trent's shoulder. It took me a couple of attempts to actually muster up the strength to walk up to them. So Yeah, I've said it before, like, don't let shyness gatekeep your passion. Like, doors are wide open if you do have good intentions. If you do really want to, like, genuinely contribute, then as Trent said, like, there is a path for you. So definitely go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. That's so great to hear. I mean, it's both of you guys have those great stories, and yeah, I think it's true that people think that the ecosystem may be more developed now and there might not be that free space to jump in, but that's so not true. We're just getting started, and those opportunities are everywhere. You really just have to start, show up, and start kind of lending a hand where you want. Okay, so moving on a little bit to the Protocol Guild. Trent, you gave a pretty good background now, but maybe as we get into that discussion, could y'all just summarize, maybe for people who are hearing about Protocol Guild the first time, um, how would you describe it?
Yes, broadly, it's a mechanism on chain that incentivizes core protocol work, and it does this with a couple different methods. But the main way it does it is through financial incentives. So there's this smart contract, like I said, and Cheeky and I are some of the people that are helping to bootstrap this mechanism, and so we'll solicit donations, which go directly to the smart contract and then are paid out directly to the core protocol contributors. And this is important because a lot of the funding naturally goes to commercial entities. So you'll have somebody working on a client team or a client. This is the software that runs the nodes. If you've ever run a node, you're running client software. Or if you ever hear of this is the actual software that makes the blockchain run. This is what things like Optimism, the op stack, they've forked Geth, which is one of the client implementations. So they're directly dependent on the work of not just the code, but they're also dependent on the network itself. So the instantiation of all these clients, this code talking to each other, creating the Ethereum mainnet network. As a layer 2, they are directly dependent on the core protocol for security, assurances, uptime, for settlement uptime. And so for these two reasons, they're using the software directly, and they're depending on the network for security. Means it's super important for L2s especially, but anybody using mainnet. And so what we do is we enable the broader ecosystem, the community, to have a conduit to send funds directly to the individuals that are making this infrastructure possible. And again, it happens over a long time. There's a couple different components. One of them is we time weight people's contributions so that there's a fair distribution of funding. There's no active decision making. It just kind of directly goes to them, and then it's vested over time. And that the reason is the Ethereum network is created and maintained over time, right? It's not this snapshot of people who are maintaining it in that specific moment that deserve the money. It's the people who are maintaining it for the next month, the next 6 months, the next few years, right? That's who we're concerned with. So, so in summary, Protocol Guild is an incentive mechanism that considers the individuals who are building the core protocol, which every application, every individual using Ethereum mainnet and the L2s depend on. And it's sometimes we forget this because it happens in the background, right? You just show up and the chain is working. The chain is has 100% uptime or close to it, I guess. Has there been downtime? I guess not. I'm trying to think back to the DAO upgrade, but that was seamless. Anyways, not to get stuck on that, but yeah, Protocol Guild is an incentive mechanism.
And so I'm trying to remember the exact timeline, but Protocol Guild is a relatively new experiment. Is that right? How long ago did you first start accepting funding through the smart contract?
Why don't you take that, Cheeky?
Yeah, so I guess officially on-chain, the Protocol Guild was launched in May of last year. via the deployment of the vesting contract that Trent mentioned. And so at that point, we started receiving donations. And then since then, we have a June analytics dashboard where you can basically see like the whole history of Protocol Guild since it was deployed on chain. So yeah, been around for just over a month now.
Just over a year.
Sorry, yeah, exactly, just over a year. And so, with the 12-month pilot behind us, all of the things that we're looking forward to in the future now is basically how do we take this mechanism now that we kind of have a pretty good proof of concept. We're pretty happy with how the pilot went. How can we kind of expand the scope of this and turn it into something that can really help, I guess, Ethereum become more resilient by further diversifying the funding that goes into Ethereum's core protocol development.
But yeah, the main so the contract was launched in May, but we've been working on it since November of 2021. So it took a couple months to flesh out the idea and then get the smart contract ready to go. But yeah.
So you mentioned a 12-month pilot. Was the original idea to try it out for a year and see if it's working and how to iterate? Was that kind of the original plan?
Yeah. Intentionally, we limited the scope, given this is financial incentives. We didn't want to scale up faster than was necessary. So, there's some interesting overlaps between how people are paid and what Protocol Guild does today and what it can do in the future. And we wanted to be very careful we're not jumping into something we don't understand the implications of, or we're not actually thinking about the long-term effects. So we intentionally kept the cap at 10 million. I think in the docs it says 10 to 20 million, and we're roughly in the middle of that in terms of funding. We actively reached out to people to send, and then there was some other stuff that came in that we didn't proactively reach out for. But yeah, we were very, very intentional about keeping the scale small for this first round, and we want to learn from it. And that's what we've been doing over the past few months since the end of May, when the pilot ended, is taking these learnings into account, writing them down, getting member feedback, and then hopefully all of this will go into the V2 when it's ready.
So to simplify things super, super simple, just so I can make sure that I'm understanding everything clearly, because I had heard of Protocol Guild before doing the research for this podcast, but to be honest, I didn't know what it actually was. I just thought it was kind of like a group of people working on Ethereum. So is the function is that each member, each contributor has a certain weight, and are they constantly getting streams from the treasury? So basically there's this treasury where anyone can donate at any time, and then there are all these members that have a certain weight, and then is the treasury constantly streaming to those members, or how are those funds actually distributed?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the way it works, we mentioned the vesting contract before, right? And so this vesting contract, it was created by the amazing folks over at 0x Splits. And it basically means that any funds sent to this address, our ENS is theprotocolguild.eth, those funds are trustlessly vested over 1 year. And they're basically vested linearly, like per block, a little bit as unlocked. And essentially, once those funds vest, then they can be pushed into another 0x Splits contract, which is called a split contract. And so this split contract basically is today a membership registry of the Protocol Guild members. And today there are 152 members. So basically we have like a list of 152 of Ethereum's core protocol contributors. And the way that we do it is that we update this list quarterly to basically see, do we need to add or remove members? And as you said, Michael, yes, each member has a weight associated with them. And the weight is basically like a time weighting. It is a square root function of the number of months a member has been contributing, multiplied by either 1 or 0.5, depending on if they've been working full-time or part-time. And so this is a really interesting dynamic because it allows us to basically, I guess, recognize past contributions by members and then reward them for those contributions. At the same time, because we use a square root, it also helps newer members catch up their weighting compared to the more long-term members. And so once you normalize that weighting across the entire membership, then you basically have like a percent per member, and that corresponds to their share of vested funds. And so we have again, an immutable vesting contract where anyone can send funds to. Vested funds get pushed to a split contract where you have all the Protocol Guild's recipients, and the funds are distributed in there.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add really quick is the reason why this time weighting is so central to the Protocol Guild concept is because back in November of 2021, when we started thinking about this idea, one of the things we wanted to get in front of was, the burgeoning L2 ecosystem, tons of DeFi applications in need of protocol designers. The application layer of Ethereum we could see it growing rapidly over the next few years. And along with that, the fact of it is there's going to be some competition for intelligent, hardworking people. And that's great. The future of Ethereum is one that has user-facing applications and, a ton of interoperable products and people building things. However, the core protocol still needs to have this native mechanism available to it to incentivize people to stick around. And so this time weighting is a key expression of that, in that we are very concerned with taking people the institutional knowledge that they've accumulated, whether it's for a client team, a specific implementation, or relationships that they have that makes it easier to collaborate with people within the core dev ecosystem. We were really concerned with recognizing the people that had they'd stuck around for a few years, or maybe even 5 years. I think we have some people that are 5 or 6 year. They have a wait of 5 or 6 years. We were really focused on recognizing that people had been around for a long time, and there's a good chance that this also correlates with their, I keep saying institutional knowledge, but it's really just the general awareness of how the protocol works, the edge cases, things like this that are really important to meaningfully contributing to something like a client implementation or the protocol generally. So the time weighting is one way that and the main way that we recognize people's contributions, and it dovetails nicely with RPGF, right? RPGF is retroactive. It's looking back at people's past contributions, and the Protocol Guild also takes that into consideration and says, you know what, we want to recognize people that were around years ago and give them financial benefit today. We just automate the weighting function or let's say we seed the weighting function from a manual process of picking and choosing to just a straightforward formula.
I think, yeah, that formula is really interesting when creating this incentive system that people can base their decisions around, right? Having something that's so clear as a simple algorithm to allow them to operate with clarity, I think is really an interesting idea that you guys have kind of taken to the maximum. Have you noticed any shortcomings in creating that algorithm? Like, have you noticed ways in which you wish you could account for, but for the sake of simplicity, you really just have to keep it algorithm based?
Yeah, that's a good question. Originally, when the original paper, it was actually just going to be a flat share per member, so everyone is equally weighted. And then, some of the members, or I guess this was pre-membership, so some of the people I was sharing it with at the time, core devs who were giving me feedback, they were like, we think this should be time weighted. And over time, it became clear that this was good for the reasons I laid out. And I think we were lucky in that this early decision that we made ended up working out. And I actually don't think I would change it. There's some discussion around this multiplier that Cheeky mentioned, whether it's 0.5 or 1, and it corresponds to how much time someone is giving, so half time or full time, yeah. So there has been some discussion around whether this should be tweaked a little bit, whether part-time should have a lower weighting or lower multiplier like 0.33 to incentivize people to start working full-time. But aside from that, I think everyone is pretty committed to this time weighting function. because of its simplicity and how much effort it would save us for something like a peer ranking system where you say, okay, I worked with X, Y, and Z, and I want to award them, 1/3 of my share that I'm able to forward to them, or whatever ranking system we came up with. This saves a ton of time, not only allocating the weights. Core devs are busy. They're doing core dev stuff, maintaining the protocol, evolving the protocol, and adding or encumbering more things into this mechanism is something that we really tried to avoid. So any peer ranking is probably not going to be included. So mainly for time. But the other reason is it sometimes has a tendency to devolve into, I guess you could call it popularity contests, but more broadly, and without assuming any ill intent, it's just the more visible work is stuff that tends to get rewarded. So let's say you're hosting a Zoom call. The host of the call is most visible, or you're somebody who's super public. Somebody like Tim, for example, he's very present in the community. He's public, but his work isn't necessarily more important than somebody who's doing key backend infrastructure for a client team, or someone who is reviewing bugs. This stuff happens, within the context of teams, but it's really hard to surface that. So I'm not saying the time weighting is perfect. There's probably ways that we could tweak it to improve, or ways in which it's deficient in recognizing people's contributions. But I think, 95% there in terms of what we want to do. So it's, simple enough, but sufficiently simple for our purposes.
Right. Those are some really interesting trade-offs that you mentioned, because those are some of the exact trade-offs that RetroPGF has with the optimism ecosystem. So we just finished the second round of RetroPGF a few months ago, and a lot of the things that you mentioned are kind of some of the worst parts of that system. I think it's a beautiful system, but it's true that one big complaint was that it was very, very hard for the badge holders, who are the actual voters on distributing the funds, to go through all of the projects and have good due diligence. And another thing, like you mentioned, it's funny because I'm actually the host of the the Optimism community Zoom calls. And so when you said about the host of the Zoom call, I resonated with that. But I realized that it's true. I am much more visible than maybe somebody who's building some tool in the back end that is a really useful tool that people are using, but maybe only a smaller subset of people are using it, and it doesn't have the visibility as much as it has an impact. So I'm curious, shifting the discussion a little bit, because this is called the RetroPGF podcast. How are you guys aware of how the whole RetroPGF system works, and what has been kind of your are either of you badge holders, or have you been involved in any of that system, or are you mostly coming at it from the Protocol Guild as a recipient?
So we've both. Well, I've been offered a badge holder role a few times. I've declined it for now. I just have too much going on. But maybe sometime in the future I'll get involved. But for the past few rounds, I have been observing the badge holder channel in the Optimism Discord. So I'm definitely aware of and following the process each time, seeing people's pain points, the challenges that are coming up, and there was another thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah, and then just like you said, from the perspective of a recipient, I've engaged with badge holders, explaining the concept to them, what Protocol Guild is, why it's important to fund, things like that, but have not been involved as a badge holder, no.
Yeah, me neither. Maybe I will be a badge holder for the next round, but nothing's been confirmed yet. But I mean, earlier I said that Ethereum interested me so much because of certain things like signing with Ethereum or data sovereignty. And the reality is that like those things haven't really kind of achieved their potential yet, right? And I think I could take a similar lens with optimism and retroactive public goods funding. Like the potential with retroactive public goods funding is amazing. Like I am a huge bull for what it can potentially do in terms of allowing all these different public goods projects to be I guess valued based on how much good they're creating in the future, right? And like kind of turn that into a market. So like, are there some flaws with the current implementation? Yes. Could it be improved? Yes. Is it like a process of experimentation? Yes. And so to the extent that we're running this experimentation and to the extent that Optimism is willing to continue to run these experimentations, like it's all a net good, right? And like I'm not smart enough to say like how can we make this better. I just know that like this is the right thing to do, and these are the kind of experiments that we need to run. And I love this ecosystem precisely because of those kind of experiments.
That's awesome. And I could say the same thing about Protocol Guild, right? The fact that that you took it upon yourself to get this going, and the ecosystem has rallied behind you guys, being Protocol Guild, right? Protocol Guild was actually the #1 funded project in the most recent round of retroactive public goods funding. Um, why do you think it is that it resonated so much with the badge holders of Optimism, the Optimism ecosystem?
Go, Cheeky.
Yeah, I think if I can call it that, I think the pitch makes sense, right? Optimism leverages Ethereum in like a bunch of different ways, like settlement, security assurances, and so like the synergies there, and also the synergies in terms of what Trent mentioned about how the Protocol Guild really has this kind of retroactive focus as well. I think it's basically for all those reasons, it's like a really good pitch, a really easy pitch for these badge holders to understand. I think everyone understands that like Ethereum is not done yet, right? For Ethereum to really achieve everything that we wanted to do, to become like a global network that empowers individuals, which is the way I think the Ethereum Foundation calls it. Like there are still so many different things that need to happen, right? And I'm sure we've all heard about the scalability trilemma. Like, how do we make sure Ethereum grows in terms of decentralization, in terms of security, in terms of scaling? Like, layer twos are obviously a foundational part of scaling Ethereum, right? But for that to happen, there needs to be changes on the layer one, on Ethereum's core protocol. Obviously, proto sharding, EIP 4844 are a huge part of that. And so there's so many different synergies. Hopefully later this year, we will see the next hard fork, which will launch EIP 4844, which will see layer 2 fees drop by an order of magnitude. And so there are so many different alignments. Yeah, that's why I think it's great to see that the badge holders have recognized Protocol Guild for the importance of this work. And hopefully we'll continue to see that in later rounds.
Yeah, I'll add that that honestly we were just so humbled by the amount, and not just the amount of OP that was allocated, but just the feedback that people gave, recognition, like Cheeky said, that this is funding your dependencies, not just for security, it's code. You're thinking long term about the stewardship of the protocol that you depend on in many different ways, and it slots so naturally into the RPGF system and ideology that it was very rewarding to see people recognize the thing that we've been building for so long. And I mean, I have my criticisms of some of the parts of RPGF, but I think overall, like what other L2 is running a public goods funding project at this scale and with this level of funding committed to it? There's nobody, and that's worth celebrating. And I will continue to shill Optimism as long as they continue doing RPGF rounds. It's a great bit of it's a great demonstration of the culture that I think the core team has promoted and the broader community has started to take up. So kudos to the people who are running it and engaging with it. I think it's incredible, and I wish there were more L2s doing something similar.
Amazing. That makes me so happy to hear you guys say that, because I agree. And I think it's interesting. Protocol Guild and Optimism through RetroPGF have this similarity in trying to fix this this market insufficiency as far as rewarding like this kind of work, where we all know that most of the people in Protocol Guild, if they just want to maximize their profit, they're smart people, they have the knowledge, they could just go straight to the application layer, they could launch a shitcoin, they could do all kinds of different things. But this kind of work is so important for the ecosystem. And the other thing is, beyond this, fixing this market problem, is that Optimism loves, obviously, base layer Ethereum to the point where the OP stack, one of the main goals was to have a minimal difference with Geth, right? And so the goal of Optimism is really to have a lot of these core protocol developers be able to make the jump and also develop on layer 2 and help out with Optimism's core protocol, the OP stack. Do you know if, I actually was trying to look through the list, do you know if there are any Optimism team members in Protocol Guild?
There used to be. Proto was a member for a while, and then he stepped back. He thinks that RPGF is a better mechanism, so he wanted to go all in on supporting that frame or that way of distributing funds. But yeah, he was a member for a bit. I don't think today there are any OP team members who are currently part of both. We have had one member go on as well to work for Optimism, but I don't think there are any currently.
Gotcha. Well, we're all one big family anyway. We're all kind of building towards the same goals. One thing I'm curious about that I kind of missed the good segue into this question, but in regards to the funding, so I think Protocol Guild got, oh, I had it up somewhere, but what could have amounted to well over $1 million worth of OP tokens in the last round. What did you guys actually do with the funding? Did that go straight to the treasury contract? Or was it used for any other purpose?
So right now it hasn't been distributed yet. The Optimism Foundation is holding it until we have an entity that can KYC. So Cheeky is one of the people looking into this, figuring out some of the bigger legal questions, and hopefully we'll have an answer on that soon. But eventually it will be distributed in the same way that all other funding is. It will go to the mainnet vesting contract and vest out autonomously to all members to claim and interact with however they see fit. So yeah, we don't make any expectation for people to use it in specific ways.
Yeah, just to add to that, so we got in the last round 557,000 tokens, which like today is worth around like $800,000. That would make Optimism the 5th largest donors. If you go to our June dashboard, we have a donor leaderboard. So Optimism they would slot in at the number 5 spot, which is pretty cool. Yeah, as Trent mentioned, they're just not in there right now because we haven't actually received it. We need to figure out some KYC stuff, but hopefully all that stuff will be figured out in the next couple months.
Yeah, that's too bad about the KYC. Nobody likes KYC, but so hopefully you guys can actually, get past that side pretty soon. And within the next few months, there is another round of RetroPGF funding, so maybe Optimism could get boosted up even higher on that leaderboard. I'm looking at the kind of the breakdown of the funding by token on the Dune dashboard right now, and I see you have Lido, Uni, ENS, all these different protocols. I guess my question is, where do the majority of funds for Protocol Guild come from? Is it mostly these independent projects that are donating, or is a big chunk from the Ethereum Foundation? How does that breakdown actually look like?
You can take this, Cheeky.
Yeah, the Ethereum Foundation has not donated anything. So all of the funds that you see in the dashboard, all the funds that the Protocol Guild has received, is really from Ethereum's ecosystem and community, right? And so again, if you look at our leaderboard, the donor leaderboard, that like the top 10 tells an amazing story, right? So Lido, Uniswap, ENS, Moloch DAO, and Nouns DAO, we, I guess, kind of solicited those donations via governance grants that they accepted. So they basically, those 5 entities helped seed the pilot when it first started. But you see Arbitrum at the top of that. And that was completely unsolicited. So obviously Arbitrum, they had their airdrop recently. And I believe there was a section specifically giving tokens to like significant DAOs that are deployed on Arbitrum. And as part of that, they made a carve out for the Protocol Guild. And the reason why I say carve out is because Protocol Guild is not deployed on Optimism, on Arbitrum or Optimism. Basically, Protocol Guild is only deployed on mainnet today, right? Our vesting contracts that we mentioned, the split contract, they're only on mainnet. We don't even have a DAO actually. All of that will be coming in version 2 of Protocol Guild's mechanism. But of course, we do plan to deploy vesting contracts on all various layer 2 chains. We're figuring out a good way to do this, probably utilizing Connext to do so, where we can basically deploy and control different vesting contracts on all the various layer 2 and EVM chains via our mainnet DAO via Connext. And so we do hope to be deployed on all those various layer 2 chains. But again, amazing to see that Arbitrum basically did a kind of a carve out to recognize the importance of the work done by the Protocol Guild. So that was, as I said, like an unsolicited donation there. But then if we also look at, what is it, number 7 and 8 currently in the leaderboard, we have Tetranode and Anthony Sassano, right? And these are like just 2 dudes, right? Like 2 individuals who are in the top 10 who have given a crazy amount of money, considering they're just individuals, large enough to be in the top 10. And so it just speaks volumes to how much support we've gotten from Ethereum's ecosystem and community.
Yeah, no money from the EF, and that's part of, we wanted to prove that we could convince the rest of the ecosystem that this mechanism is useful and important and that they should contribute to. So it was kind of a test for ourselves to get this pilot off the ground. In the future, we will definitely be asking the EF to fund core developers through this mechanism. We think has a ton of promise and specific characteristics, like we've talked about throughout this space, that make it really, really useful for funding the core protocol over time. You know it's going to individuals. You know it's going to be an accurate snapshot of membership every quarter it gets updated. So yeah, long term, we will be asking the EF, as well as basically any organization we can convince to give us some time to give our pitch. We will try to build the norm and reach out to as many as possible once the V2 is ready.
Awesome. And I'm so glad you mentioned V2, because my next question is, what is the future of Protocol Guild? I know you mentioned kind of limiting this first experiment in a few different ways, but now that you're past that and it looks like it's working, you have the support of the entire Ethereum ecosystem. What kinds of things are you excited about for the future of Protocol Guild, and what are your plans?
Should I grab this, Trent?
Yep.
I'll grab it. Yeah, so like Protocol Guild V2, I mean, we've been working on this for months, since the start of the year, maybe even a little bit before, actually. And so I guess I explained earlier about the vesting contracts and the split contract. And the split contract was the one which basically is the membership registry, right? What I didn't mention was how that's updated. And today it's updated via a 6 out of 10 multi-sig. And you know, we want to move away from multi-sig dependencies because it's updated manually. It actually involves importing a CSV into 0x splits with like the addresses and their weights, this percentage. And so we want to move away from using multi-sigs. We want to move away from like manual human work. And so as part of that, we've been working closely with the crew over at DAO House. Huge shout out to Deacon Santiago and those guys for helping us with this. We're basically going to deploy a Moloch v3 DAO. It works like any other DAO you can imagine. 1 member, 1 vote. This one would obviously be specifically for Ethereum's, for the Protocol Guild members. where existing members can create proposals to add or remove members. And then once those proposals have been passed and executed, it will basically update an on-chain membership registry that will basically be a contract that's separate from the DAO and separate from 0x Splits contracts. And this contract will be able to basically calculate all of the weights on chain. So we're trying to figure out how to optimize the gas fees for that right now. But basically it'll be able to run through all those calculations for us, the square root functions, all that good stuff, and then basically feed itself into the 0x Splits contracts so that we don't need to update it via a multi-sig or via a CSV upload. Right. And so those are like the two huge things that we have planned for Protocol Guild V2, having a DAO and a sort of an on-chain membership registry that's separate from 0x Splits. So we get rid of those multi-sig dependencies. We get rid of the potential human involvement there. And then, as I mentioned before, we're also working closely with the Connects team to basically figure out, okay, how can we, once we have this mainnet kind of system in place, then how can we kind of replicate that, replicate all the vesting and split contracts on all the various layer 2 chains. We will also have replica membership registries on the layer 2 chains, which again just mirror what we have on mainnet, so that they can also feed into those 0x Splits contracts. So those are kind of like the three aspects of Protocol Guild V2. And then, as Trent alluded to, we are doing some investigations into like how can we easily KYC for donors, but we don't really have a conclusion on how we're going to do that yet. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a good summary of what we have planned for Protocol Guild V2.
Awesome. That's super exciting. Yeah, it sounds like Protocol Guild, just like RetroPGF, it's kind of going through this experimentation or this iteration. I'm curious, you guys, I heard Trent, I think you mentioned a 10 million cap. Were you actually capping the amount of funding that you were receiving before? And now that the experiment has kind of proven itself out, are you hoping to grow the total amount of funding in the treasury?
Yeah, it was intentionally capped. Like I said, we didn't want to introduce mechanisms at a magnitude where it would possibly cause some really unexpected and negative outcomes. So we wanted to start small, and 10. I think the range was 10 to 20 million. We wanted to be somewhere in there, and that's kind of where we ended up. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but you have to remember it's distributed between at the start, I think 120 members. Today it's 150. So once you divide it out, it's a nice little bonus, but it's not enough.
It's not a lot at all. All these core developers, core contributors, they deserve to be filthy rich. So let's try and get everyone. That's the thing with RetroPGF too, is that like the people that are getting this funding deserve it, right? The richest people shouldn't be some scam or some like hype driven protocol.
Yep.
Right? It should be the ones that are building the actual core of the system that can actually change the world. And so I would love to see you guys have $100 million distributing to 100 people.
And yeah, that's what we're aiming for. Depending on how long the vesting period is, it'll probably be longer than a year. That's one of the decisions we need to make as a collective. But we are aiming for somewhere around 100 million for the V2, or at least the amount that we hope to have sitting in the contract at all times. We'll see if this ends up playing out or we're able to reach it. Maybe it's too ambitious, but we'll see. But that's generally what we're looking for. We're going to hopefully scale it up by an order of magnitude. And if Tim Byko were on the call, his goal is rolling billions. So we'll start with 100 million and maybe someday we'll get to billions. But yeah, it's like you said, these are the people that are enabling all the legitimate projects and all of the maybe not so legitimate projects, but like all of this activity that's happening on mainnet. And this is a perfect way to recognize their work, give them some financial security over the years. Reward them proportional to the impact that they've had. I think that would be the RPGF framing.
Yeah, and just further to quantify that 100 million, because again, you do need to divide that out by the amount of Protocol Guild members, right? And so if we assume it's $100 million, over 4 years, 150 Protocol Guild members, that is approximately 170K per member, which you could argue is far less than they can work, that they can receive working for different projects with tokens, like, for example, layer twos, for example. And so like, we need to keep that in mind. The Protocol Guild will not have an unlimited amount of members. The fact is that Ethereum's core protocol development requires such specific knowledge that we're not going to see the Protocol Guild's membership scale orders of magnitude. I don't know what you think the correct number is, Trent, but like, I personally would be shocked to see it go like above 500, for example, to like double from here. But yeah, like, the Protocol Guild requires continuous funding, right? So to the extent that we have players in the space like Optimism contributing to this cause with retroactive public good funding, that's obviously amazing. One of the things that we're also trying to establish is the norm that projects that are built on Ethereum, they donate 1% of their tokens or profit or revenue towards Ethereum's core protocol development via the Protocol Guild. Because if we have that, if like, projects that spin up are automatically doing that, then we will have a truly self-sustaining funding mechanism for all this work.
Right. Yeah. And like, to echo that, the EF has done an amazing job of funding the core protocol for the past number of years. However, it's time to grow past that and get to a mechanism that's truly has distributed funding coming in, and just it distributes it out to a set of individuals that are doing important work. And the EF can't provide these, even if it wanted to, it couldn't produce this mechanism. Like, what is it going to do? Market buy a token and then distribute it? No, that's ridiculous. So it can't get developers exposure to the financial upside or whatever, just exposure generally, whether it's upside or downside sometimes. It can't do that natively. So this is a mechanism that allows them to allows developers to have exposure to the broader ecosystem, including those L2s that are depending on it.
That's amazing. I think you guys put such a good bow on everything that it's hard to add a follow-on comment. But yeah, it's really, I would love to see. I mean, Cheeky, you mentioned like the actual breakdown of the numbers. An average developer in San Francisco, a good developer, is making, almost $1 million a year. And so those Protocol Guild members should be making at least double or triple that, right? Yeah, just in general, having the support from the ecosystem, the 1%, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I'm not sure if you two saw recently, but Optimism is trying to do the same thing with their super chain, is make the standard that sequencer revenue for these layer twos are a part of the super chain are going right into retroactive public goods funding to fund these projects for the ecosystem. And Base just announced that either 15% of sequencer net revenue or 2.5% of total revenue is going to retroactive public goods funding. So there's definitely some lessons that can be drawn upon, or like a standard that can be created between Optimism and Protocol Guild.
Yep, yeah, that's incredible to see, and obviously very supportive of people recognizing public goods funding is important and actually following through on that.
And the best part is a lot of that funding from Base will probably go back to Protocol Guild too after retroactive public goods funding. Yeah. So thank you, both of you, so much for coming on the podcast. It really was a great conversation. Honestly, it would be great to even go deeper, because I feel like these are topics where you can go as deep as you want. But it's been great learning about Protocol Guild. If people listening want to go and learn more, or maybe start helping out, or where are the best places for them to go, and what are the best things that you're looking for right now? Is it just awareness of this, of that Protocol Guild exists and is accepting donations and is important? How would you pitch the audience on how they can help Protocol Guild?
Yeah, definitely. the main thing, like you said, is definitely awareness. We've been building since the end of 2021, live with the pilot since May of last year, or I guess the pilot has ended, but so it feels like a long time for us, but in reality, it still needs a ton of awareness and helping people to understand the concept. And so that's actually why podcasts and people like you are awesome for helping us to get more awareness, broadcast the message of why we think it's important. So again, thanks for that. Awareness is huge at this point. It took Gitcoin many years to get to the scale it was today. Optimism, I think, it's happened a little bit quicker just because it has, it's a prominent L2. So I think the RPGF mechanism got to the same level of Gitcoin mind share a little bit faster. But we're still, I feel like, a little under the radar. But I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing for more awareness. So one of the things, like I said, more awareness would be amazing. So if you're interested in helping, check out our Discord. You can also follow on Twitter. We have an account, Protocol Guild, where we will do regular updates here and there. And yeah, we're like, Cheeky just showed up. He came up to me at DevCon and said, "Hey, I think this is really cool, and I'd like to help you." And so I gave him things to do, and now he's taken on a ton of the work and has been doing an incredible job. So if you're listening to this call now or sometime in the future, the recorded version, please do reach out. We are always looking for collaborators, people to help spread awareness, and we'd welcome any ideas or just engagement. Yeah, talking about it, asking questions, helping us poke holes in it, figuring out where the mechanism reaches its limits, things like that. But let me know if I missed anything, Cheeky.
No, that was beautiful, and thank you for the shout out. I guess my own kind of conclusion would kind of be to shill something else, actually, because we talked about how the Protocol Guild basically exists to try to help create these incentives to onboard and retain Ethereum's core protocol contributors. But the Protocol Guild itself cannot help you become a core protocol contributor, right? And so if you are interested in doing that work, I would highly recommend you check out the Ethereum Protocol Fellowship. We talked about how this work can be incredibly challenging. You need a lot of fluency in all these different protocol level stuff that I don't even begin to understand. And so the Ethereum Protocol Fellowship is basically designed to help on-ramp you, to getting past all those barriers, provide support, guidance, all that kind of stuff that could lead towards you becoming a core dev in the future, whatever being a core dev means. So yeah, if something like that interests you, then please search the Ethereum Protocol Fellowship, and then who knows, hopefully we'll see you in the Protocol Guild in the future.
Awesome. I'm so happy to have you two here and to have you two working to make Ethereum better. It's great to have people that are so dedicated. And I'm sure this won't be our last conversation. I'm sure Optimism and Protocol Guild will continue to help each other in the future. But once again, thank you guys for coming. It's been a great topic. Everything will be recorded and posted later. But thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And you said we could probably have another call digging even deeper, and I'm totally happy to do that. I'm sure Cheeky would as well. So anytime in the future you want to talk about this, happy to. So yeah, thank you. And looking forward to the next round coming up. We'll also be participating in that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. You've been a great host, and you're doing great work. So keep it up. And thank you to all the listeners, of course.